Hi, I'm Anthony Del Col, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's August 7th, 2020. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Anthony Del Col. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Anthony is a best-selling comics, TV, and digital writer-producer of Kill Shakespeare, Assassin's Creed, and the current series The Death of Nancy Drew. Another recently released project is Assassin's Creed Gold, an 8-episode audio drama starring Emmy Award winner Riz Ahmed, which is Audible's top-rated release of 2020. His first project with Audible, the found footage thriller Unheard, the story of Anna Winslow, hit number 1 on Audible for 4 weeks straight in 2017, breaking download records. His graphic novel with Image Comics' Son of Hitler was described by NPR as a few war stories are this much fun, and nominated for a Ringo Award for Best Graphic Novel. Luke Cage Everyman, his first Marvel Comics project, featured Luke Cage tracking down a serial killer while dealing with a diagnosis of CTE. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Anthony Del Col.
Anthony Del Col, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Happy to be on the show.
Cool. What I usually do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
Oh, wow. This is a hard-hitting question. I'm going to embarrass myself here because I can't remember the exact number, but it's Alpha Flight. It's a classic one where they're attacking Wolverine in the wilderness, like in the woods. And I remember looking up this cover, and I remember looking up the exact details about the comic maybe about a year or two ago when I was promoting Luke Cage with Marvel. But I can't remember. All I remember is, oh my God, now I'm blanking on the character's name, is punching Wolverine right on the cover. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because the guy was, and I'm so embarrassed that I can't remember the name of the character. But I mean, I just love the fact that it was a Canadian that was taking down Wolverine, who of course was Canadian. But I didn't know that at the time. I was maybe 5 years old, growing up in Timmins, Ontario. But yeah, I just loved the action, the kinetic energy of that cover, and so I asked my mom to buy it for me, and I brought it home and I devoured it. I think I read it like 10, 20 times. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that was the first comic book I first started to read, and then I got into G.I. Joe and Batman along the way as well. Like I said, growing up in the North, you had nothing else to do but read comics and watch TV.
Sure. I mean, that's a great, memorable comic book for sure. But I'm wondering if you could tell me who inspires you to create your art today?
Who inspires me? Wow, that is a really good question. I mean, the comic writer today that inspires me the most, I know it's a cliche answer, but Brian K. Vaughan.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, I think he is the best writer in comics. Just the stuff he does, not only with Saga and with Paper Girls, but I mean, Why the Last Man, I still put up on the pedestal. That is still, to me, my favorite comic series of all time. He combines great action, great character moments, humor. He's just a phenomenal storyteller from start to finish. And I've only had 2 or 3 fanboy experiences in my life where I meet someone, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm meeting this person right now. One of them was Brian K. Vaughan at the Image booth at New York Comic Con a few years ago. We just happened to both be back in the meeting room. I was about to have a meeting with one of the people at Image, and I think he was doing some media. And before you know it, we strike up a conversation, and then I'm like, oh my God, you are Brian K. Vaughan. And I brought up this really obscure feature film script of his that he had written 10, 12 years ago, and that I'd read. And he's like, how did you get your hands on that? I'm like, I won't tell you how. Let me just say, I'd love to do that one day. As a comics writer, as a comics creator, he's someone that really, really inspires me.
Cool. Now, speaking about things 10 years ago, I first learned about you when I was chatting with Connor McCreary about the award-winning Kill Shakespeare, and that first issue was published more than 10 years ago. So looking back, do you have any thoughts on that series, what it means to you, and what may have been going through your mind when you first created it?
Well, first of all, you bring up Connor. Don't trust anything that he says, especially if he's saying anything about me. It's all lies and fake news. No, I'm just kidding. Connor's a great guy. So yeah, I mean, looking back, I can't believe it's been 10 years since I first
Mm-hmm.
got into the comic space, and then the 10 years since Kill Shakespeare was first published. That just boggles my mind. I mean, I look back now, and of course, I am my own worst critic. I will read something that people love, and I can point out every single thing that's wrong with it. I'm like, oh, I should have done this. I could have done that. We could have done this. Blah blah blah. So I look back now, and with Kill Shakespeare, I can point out all the things that I would do differently now. But I mean, that's the way you are as a creator. You're evolving. You're learning craft. You're learning different aspects of telling characters and telling stories. So I look back at Kill Shakespeare. I'm like, oh my god, there's a bunch of things that are wrong. However,
Uh,
having said that, I mean, there's just so much energy, and there's a lot of really, really good stuff on that because that was published in 2010.
mm,
But Connor and I first came up with that story in 2003, 2004, and so we worked on it as a feature film screenplay because we didn't know what
mhm.
we were doing. And then Connor was the one that really brought me back into comic space, and that's when I came up with the idea of doing it as a comic series. So I'm so incredibly proud of it. I'm so happy that we've had thousands and thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people that are fans, probably hundreds of thousands at this point, that are fans, that are readers of it, whether it's the comic, whether it's the stage show, whether it's the board game, whether it's whatever else. I mean, I'm extremely proud of it. It's one of the things that I think I am the most proudest of in my life. But as a creator, now 10 years later, I can look back and go, oh my God, what were we thinking doing this and doing that? Like, again, not the overall story, but small little character points or small little plot details.
Well, that's definitely the past, but you're still working today like gangbusters. And what if you could talk about some of your current and upcoming books? I know that Nancy Drew is out right now, and I just saw a tweet about Assassin's Creed Origins. Wonder if you could talk about some of your current work.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's three things really, I guess, that have come out or are coming out in 2020. The first was, well, actually, technically the first was Assassin's Creed Origins. So
Mhm.
I had written the comic book. Connor and I had done 3 volumes of the Assassin's Creed comic spin-offs with Titan Comics. I think that was back in 2015, no, maybe 2016, 2017. So yeah, we really thoroughly enjoyed it. And then we wrote the 3 volumes, and then they came to me maybe about a year and a half, 2 years later, back in 2017, I think, just after Origins had come out. Titan wanted to do a spin-off comic series to tell sort of a prequel story or an unofficial sequel to the Aya character. And so they've been fans of what I'd done with Nancy Drew. They've been fans of the earlier Titans series. So they asked me to come on board. So that was 4 issues, 1 volume. I think that came out in 2018. So I did that, but I've stayed in the Assassin's Creed family since then.
Mhm.
And earlier this year, Assassin's Creed Gold came out with Audible Worldwide, which is a podcast spin-off. It's a brand new story, brand new characters. It tells a story in 1696 of Isaac Newton, who we all know as this philosopher, the thinker, the scientist. But for a 3 year period, and this is true, he was a badass, dirty Harry, John McClane type character, and he tracked down all these counterfeiters. He was the warden of the Royal Mint. So I tell that as the backdrop to this story with a blind assassin who teams up with him. It's sort of like a Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Moriarty type
Ah,
story.
right.
Yeah, it was a blast. It stars Riz Ahmed, the Emmy Award winner for The Night of. He was in Star Wars Rogue One, Venom, the Jason Bourne. One of the best actors today. So they got him on board. Anthony Head from Buffy the Vampire
Hmm.
Slayer plays Isaac Newton. It's a great British cast. So that was something that I had done the comics. I knew the people at Ubisoft. I'd done a couple podcast series, audio dramas with Audible in the UK. So I brought the two together, and we decided to do an Assassin's Creed series. So that's the number one top rated new show of 2020 in Audible across the world, which is phenomenal. And then in the comics front, as you mentioned, I'm the creator and the writer of The Death of Nancy Drew. It's something that I had. It's not something where they came to me. I had basically worked with a license holder. I'd come up with this concept of doing a noir version of Nancy Drew. The first story was The Big Lie. And this is where the two Hardy brothers, Joe and Frank, are accused of murdering their father, and they have to turn to femme fatale esque Nancy Drew to clear their names. So that came out in 2017, nominated for a Ringo Award, acclaimed across the board. And then this is the follow up series, The Death of Nancy Drew. So in this one, Nancy's dead, and now Frank and Joe have to track down, who her murderer is. But there was a lot of scandal or controversy when it was announced back at the end of January. Back in January before the pandemic, which seems like years and years ago,
Yeah.
which
So
seems like
long
10 years
ago.
ago on its own.
Yeah.
I know. But yeah, so when that was announced, people were in a bit of an uproar. We went viral online. People were upset that we were killing Nancy Drew on the 90th anniversary of the creation of the character.
Mm-hmm.
They were upset that it was two male creators, myself and artist Joe Eisma, and that everyone thought we were fridging Nancy Drew.
Right.
Now, the first two issues are out, and I'm sure anyone that's read it can attest. We have not fridged Nancy. Nancy is still in the story, and it is her story more so than Frank and Joe's. I don't want to give any spoilers, but we start off the story with Joe Hardy at the grave of Nancy Drew. He knows, she died in a car accident, but he's convinced that there's more to the story. And so, so he goes to investigate it. It's very noir. Like I love the noir genre. I love storytelling, or I love telling stories in that genre. And so we did it with Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, The Big Lie, and this is very noir. So it's all shadows, it's all deception. We dive into the seedy underbelly of the Midwest. We find out what's ailing this small town that is a factory town that once was quite successful, and in the last 10, 15 years, factories have closed, people are desperate, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a blast to be able to do, and yeah, I mean, I've got a great team that I'm working on it with. So Joe Eisma, like I said, our editor Matt Idelson is phenomenal, one of the best editors I've ever worked with. So yeah, that's great. And then the third thing is I've been doing something called the unofficial title is Comics Insider, but I've been working with Insider.com and creating comics journalism.
Oh.
And when I say comics journalism, I don't mean we're taking a look at the comics industry and writing and reporting about it. What we've done, myself and artist Josh Adams, is we take some top stories in the world and we do deep dives into it. The first issue or the first story came out back in February, and that was Donald Trump's impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually did all the background in it. So, I mean, what happened, all the conspiracy theories, what he did, what him and Giuliani and everyone did when they were talking to the Russians and the Ukrainian prime minister, and, everything, all of his interactions with the House and the Senate, that sort of thing. So that came out. Like I said, I think it was late February. That was huge. I think over 500,000 people viewed it or read it. Huge success. And so based off that, they've asked us to do more.
Oh, wow.
So our second story, I think, comes out in the next week or two. It deals with Princess Harry and or Meghan Markle and their escape from the royalty. And then we've got a number of other stories that are going to be coming out in the next few months. That's been a blast because I've never done nonfiction comic storytelling before.
Right. Yeah.
So it takes a lot of research, and Josh is a great artist. He's able to really capture what these real life people look like and some of the incidents and moments that actually happened. So it's been a blast, and the team at Insider is great. And we're hopefully, we'll be able to print a physical version of that, a collected trade, probably at some point in 2021. We're in discussions right now with potential publishers on that.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds like you're keeping busy. That's for sure.
Well, you gotta. Otherwise, you're gonna just look out at the state of the world and become depressed. So instead, I get to create stories for Insider about what's happening in the world. That makes me doubly depressed, I guess.
Oh,
no. Oh, now you said you wouldn't make me cry, but I'm making myself cry right now.
No, well, let's switch the topic slightly. I mean, with all your writing that you've been doing over the years, I'm wondering if you might have one piece of advice that you'd like to pass along to newcomers who are thinking about getting in the comic book business.
Wow, it's a great question. I mean, I feel like all the number one piece of advice are all going to be cliches. I mean, the number one thing is just to read as much as possible, read as many comics, just to understand the storytelling, to understand the storytelling mechanisms of the medium. I mean, it took me a while. Like when Connor and I started to work on Kill Shakespeare as a comic, I needed to do another deep dive into the comic space, and I had to reread a bunch of classics. Again, going back to Brian K. Vaughan, reread like how does he structure a 20 or 22 page issue? How does he structure a 5 or 6 issue volume? I mean, how do the turn pages work? I mean, how many panels should you be having? So I mean, really reading as many comics as possible, but more importantly, just reading in general, more than just comics. Read scripts, whether it's film or TV scripts. Read books. Read prose novels. Read nonfiction storytelling. Just really understand the mechanism behind it, and then read some of the theories as well. So I mean, I don't like to say, hey, you should read this book or this book in terms of, but I mean, just something simple as the hero's journey.
Right.
And again, I know it's a huge cliche. Christopher Vogler wrote a book and the name is eluding me right now. I apologize. It's been a long day already, and I've got a 15-month-old son that's
Sure.
been, we have to take care of him because we're all working from home these days. So I've got baby brain right now. But no, I mean, Christopher Vogler wrote a great one which dissects the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell for feature films, and I felt like I learned so much from that. And then beyond that, I mean, just dialogue is something that I've always found to be the most challenging part. I mean, structure I have down. I know how to put together a beat sheet. I know generally how an issue should flow, how a volume should flow, how a nonfiction story should flow. But I mean, in terms of actual dialogue, I mean, just go out and listen to people. Whether you're on the subway, which I don't know if many people are taking the subways these days, if you're out in public, I try to just sit back. I try to be silent and I listen to people. Listen to the cadence of their voices, how they talk, whether there's a lot of verbal crutches, the ums and the ahs, the likes, that sort of thing. And to really get a feel for how people talk today, because I think that's so important when it comes to writing in general.
Cool. Well, that's great advice for sure. Wondering for people who want to find out more about what you're up to now and in the future, where can people find you online?
Online, I mean, I've got my website, which is more of a landing page than anything else, anthonydelcol.com. On social media, mainly, I go through, I hop onto Twitter. I mean, I'm not really a big Facebook person these days. I just don't really trust Facebook or don't like what they're doing to democracy these days. But yeah, I mean, Twitter's the best place. So that's at Anthony_Del Col. I have an Instagram account, but I don't really use it. Anything that's coming out that's new, I'll always post it. I think the new Death of Nancy Drew comes out next week. And like I said, the next Business Insider, nonfiction, Comics Insider will be coming out at some point in the next 2 weeks, I believe. But yeah, anthonydelcol.com is always the best place to go to. And then from there, you'll be able to find all my other pages.
Great. Well, Anthony, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Well, I mean, this is a Canadian comic trader podcast. So, I mean, I just wanted to say that, even though I'm currently residing in New York, well, technically Brooklyn, I'm so glad that first of all, I mean, I'd like to make an observation. I'd like to say I'm so glad that you're doing this for Canadian comics creators. So I wanted to commend you for it.
Well, thank you.
Because I mean, one of the cool things, not because I live in the States now, especially in this pandemic where the border technically is almost closed to myself and my family at the moment. I mean, I miss you guys. And I mean, I miss Canadian comic storytelling or like being able to hang out in Toronto or other areas of the country with Canadian creators, because Canada's got such great talent. I mean, you just look at what Marvel and DC are doing, or some of the top image creators, or I mean, everyone across the board is so talented. There's so many great Canadians that are there. But yeah, no, I mean, technically I've already plugged everything that's coming up. I mean, I've got my back catalog that's, if people haven't checked out Kill Shakespeare or Luke Cage or Son of Hitler at Image or any of those, I mean, by all means. But I guess I have questions for you. I mean, like, what are you reading these days that you really like that you could recommend to me?
Just picked up Bix by Scott Chandler. I was tracking him for literally years when he was putting this together. He was off the circuit. He was doing a few things sporadically, but didn't want to talk about it till it was all done. The sad thing is that he worked his guts out and wanted to do a book tour, and this thing happened. So it's affected many creators today that they've come out with these great works, but they have no way to physically show them off. So my hope is that through interviews we can spread the word and get that type of message out to people who want to purchase great books.
I lump Scott Chandler in the same category as Conor McCreary, so don't trust anything that he says. It's all fake news. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I mean, I've been following all of his artwork and all of his progress on that for the last year or so. I mean, Scott is one of the nicest guys. Again, a super uber talented Canadian comics creator who's just also one of the nicest guys ever. And so, yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned him, and I am embarrassed that I have not read Bix yet myself. But I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a reminder that I need to pick up a copy. So for those listening, check out The Death of Nancy Drew and check out Assassin's Creed Origins or Assassin's Creed Gold, but also check out Bix by Scott Chandler. He's one of Canada's top storytellers.
Thanks to Anthony for the chat. You can discover more about Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_DELCOL and online at anthonydelcol.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. Truth Country Comics Podcast is copyright Truth Country Comics, copyright 2020.